All right. Well, we're going to get started. Continue, I guess. I'm going to start reading from, as I set up the topic for, I don't know how many weeks this is going to go, actually. I was talking with Joel about it, and I can go multiple weeks, I'm certain, just on this theme alone, in multiple aspects of our lives. I'm going to be reading from 2 Corinthians chapter 10, if you have your Bibles or your apps out. If you put the breakfast burrito that you have in your hand, if you give me a bite of it first. I'm just kidding. If you bring breakfast burritos, I need one. That's all I'm saying. So that'll be the end of that. Anything. I did. They had breakfast burritos at Branches last week, and I got eggs and cilantro. That was it. That was all that was left, just eggs and cilantro. Okay. Rant over, griping done. If you're with us, 2 Corinthians chapter 10, verses 1 through 5 says this. It's Paul talking. He says, "Now I, Paul," hey, how smart I am, "appeal to you with the gentleness and kindness of Christ. Though I realize you think I am timid in person and bold only when I write from far away, well, I'm begging you now so that when I come, I won't have to be bold with those who think we act from human motives. We are human, but we don't wage war as humans do. We use God's mighty weapons, not worldly weapons, to knock down the strongholds of human reasoning and to destroy false arguments. We destroy every proud obstacle that keeps people from knowing God. We capture their rebellious thoughts and teach them to obey Christ." 2 Corinthians 10, 1 through 5. And that is the journey that we should be on in taking captive our thoughts and those rebellious thoughts. How many of you guys are with me, have rebellious thoughts? Yeah, does it happen when you're in your car and your windows are up and somebody is driving in front of you, not to your liking? It happens to me then. Happens a lot of times, though. We all have rebellious thoughts, I think. We all have these tendencies to have thoughts that are not of God. Are you with me there? There's a terminology. I'm kind of a geek, and some of you nerds and geeks will be with me this morning. There's a terminology in computer science, and it was come up by a man named George Fuchsel. I don't know exactly how to pronounce his name, but he was a programmer at IBM, and he instructed computer programming for a long time, and he came up with this term, and it's an acronym, GIGO, garbage in, garbage out. Garbage in, garbage out. And this is the theme I want to talk about because it's the theme of our life, and I think it plays along with this 2 Corinthians topic that we're talking about, 2 Corinthians chapter 10, that those thoughts that come into our mind, the garbage that comes into our mind, the garbage we, sometimes put into our minds, right? Because we become the filter. We are the filter. The garbage that goes into our mind, if it's garbage going in, what's coming out? Right, that was what George figured out. When you're programming a computer, if you put in bad data, what comes out on the other side? If you put a monkey at a keyboard, are you going to get a novel at the other end? You're not going to, right? It's not going to be a novel. I mean, I know they say they've put enough monkeys on typewriters eventually in multiple universes, they'll write a Shakespeare novel, but it's yet to be seen. We're going to go with the theory that garbage in means garbage out. The Bible says that pride goes before destruction, and it's our pride, I think, oftentimes that lets us think that we can continue to consume garbage and put out something different that is not garbage. But the people around you know that it's garbage. You ever around somebody who's just sweet all the time, and they're just very harmonious, and they're probably not a person who's taking in garbage from the world. They probably don't run in circles with a bunch of rats. They probably fly with eagles. You know what I'm saying? I'm laying that down because who you are around, the things that you consume mentally, through your eyes, through your soul, through your spirit, what you put in is what ultimately is going to come out. It simply means that bad input will produce bad output every single time. If you find a mean, evil, vicious dog, you can probably understand that the owner is not a kind, loving owner. to that dog. The dog has probably been treated maliciously and been beaten. It's almost true of all animals. If you find a crude, rude, mean, nasty, vicious animal, the owner will also be rude and vicious. Garbage in, garbage out. How many of you guys know that you put garbage into your life? You consume garbage in conversations. How many of you know that we don't put enough good into our lives? We go about our lives. That's probably more of it, right? We probably aren't. We're probably good enough people. I want to think that we're good enough people, that we're not seeking out nasty input into our lives. I'd like to think that. But the reality is, it's not only avoiding the nasty input in our lives, it's about putting in the positive input into our soul, our mind, and our spirit. Is it not? It really is. The bad input creates bad output every time. The phrase applies to the human mind as much as it does the computer. As much as you think you can hammer away on those keys and not write anything beautiful and something awesome is going to come out, the same thing is going to happen with your life. If you continue to put in dirty, evil, vicious thoughts, if you entertain those thoughts that, hey, how many of you guys get those thoughts? And you entertain them and they play on your mind, whether it's relational, whether it's, about your children, about your spouse, about your boss, or whatever those things are. When you run those over and over again, eventually something bad is going to come out. This is the reason that God tells us in 2 Corinthians 10:5, bring every thought into captivity to the obedience of Christ. Bring every thought. See, God knows that we're going to have thoughts that are evil, right? They just crop up. You guys don't think those things up intentionally. I mean, we probably do sometimes. Yeah. A couple smiles out there. Maybe you guys watching online. But how many of you guys just get these thoughts ever in your mind? Something pops in your mind and it's evil. And you realize it and you just go, where did that come from? Did I see that in a movie? Was that, where in the world did that phrase come from? Why, when you filtered that out and it didn't cross your lips, it didn't, the time that it didn't, your tongue didn't enunciate those things, and you actually stopped it before it came out, before you stuck your foot in your mouth, and it was really ugly. You ever wonder, where those things come from? I take peace in knowing that God knew that we would deal with these situations, and he tells us, bring every thought into captivity to the obedience of Christ. This computer axiom, garbage in, garbage out, God says the same thing in another way. As a man thinks in his heart, so is he. As a man thinks in his heart, so is he. That's Proverbs 23:7. So is he, it's our actions, right? If we think these things regularly, if we entertain the garbage, our life, the reflection of our life will be garbage. How many of you guys know somebody who's a trashy person? Don't point at anybody, okay? But you know somebody how many of you guys know somebody that just wallows in the gutter, and maybe they're part of your life. Maybe it's a family member who's just not found their way towards Christ. Maybe they just embrace that drama regularly. But the reality is we know what it looks like. We know what the output looks like. It turns into actions, but it all begins with our thoughts. We do the things that we think about, don't we? We do. If you think about constantly writing a book, I want to write a book. I had this epiphany in my life, or I had this beautiful story. I want to write a book, and you think about it, and you think about it, and you think about the chapters, and you think about what you'd say in each and every one of the chapters, and you sit down and you've thought about it a lot. But everything that we do takes thought beforehand. Everything that you do in your life takes thought. Thankfully, we don't do everything that we think about. Amen? Yeah? You guys have a decent filter going on up there? Some things go across the screen, and you're like, it's just okay to let that one go. I saw it. I'm going to try and forget it. I'm going to take that captive. I'm going to give that to God. I'm going to swipe on by and just let that thing go. Thankfully, we don't do everything that we think about, but we do not do anything that we don't think about. Think about that for a second. A lot of thinking going on this morning. We don't do everything that we think about, but everything that we do is something that we've thought about, is it not? Think about this. The man who eventually finds himself in a situation of adultery, maybe. Let's pick on men today, right? Man, he didn't get in that position without ever thinking about that, right? If you ever hear the stories of men who have gotten into situations of adultery, it started out by entertaining a thought, right? Oh, that woman's beautiful. I like her personality. I would like to be alone with her for a while. Let me go on this business trip. Oh, it's just a business trip. Oh, we'll stay in the same hotel. Okay, we're staying in the same hotel. Nothing's going to happen. I love my wife. You go on, so on and so forth, so on. And then, oh, we'll just have one drink. It's at the bar. There's other people around. There's nobody left at the bar. Now it's just the two of us. And then it goes on and progresses all the way until something. The reality is, for that man, the reality is likely he's entertained those thoughts before they ever happen. That's why when the Bible says, bring every thought into captivity and obedience to Christ, he means every thought. Because not everything that we think we do, but everything that we do, we've put some thought into. Have we not? Right? How about telling off your boss? You ever wonder where all those words came from? You're like, man, that was raise your hand if you ever told anybody off. And those words just came out like a fire hydrant. And you're like, man, that was the most profound thing I've ever said. Like, those words just flowed out. Why did they flow out like that? Because you thought about them. You put mental energy into those a lot of times. You rehearsed that scenario time and time again. Maybe it was a boss. Maybe it was a spouse. Maybe it was a brother or a sister or a mother and a father. I had a pastor friend of mine when I was in Arkansas, and he talked about people who gunny sack. Some people, you get on their bad side. You say something, you do something a little curt. They'll tell you right there. They're just right there in the open. Hey, what are you doing? Like, you really treat people like that? Other people just, they gunny sack it. They put it in, right? In a lifetime of taking all that little bit of abuse, it gets stuck in a gunny sack over and over and over until that sack becomes too full that it won't hold anymore. And then all of a sudden, they just explode on somebody, right? The reality is, not everything that we think we do, but everything that we do, we've thought of. That's why it's so important, again, bring every thought into captivity to the obedience of Christ. What is the obedience of Christ? To be loving and kind and generous and self-sacrificing and to persevere and all of those things. That is the obedience of Christ. In each and every relationship, we should take those thoughts captive in the obedience of Christ. We should filter them through love and service and self-sacrifice and all of those things. As the Bible says in Ephesians 6:12, for we are not fighting against flesh and blood enemies, but against every ruler and authorities of the unseen world, against mighty powers in the dark world, and against evil spirits in heavenly places. The battle that we're fighting in here is not just a physical battle. It's not just, when you ask the question, when I ask the question to you, which I know you've asked yourselves, where did that thought come from? Where did it come from? Where does it come from? It comes from the enemy of your soul, right? The enemy of your soul that's trying to get a hold of your tongue and trying to place these ideas into your head. Why? So they can take root, so they can continue to grow. And if we don't take those things captive, then what happens? They do grow. The thoughts find fertile ground. They find fertile ground in our mind. They find fertile ground in our soul. And they corrupt us from the inside out. So this battle that we're in, the battle can be won. We can control our thoughts, but it starts even before our brains. The way to do this is to line up our thoughts with what Jesus taught and what God's Word preaches, or God's Word teaches, I should say. The approach is threefold, really. It's heart, mind, and soul, right? You know how our heart, mind, and soul are kind of all, if somebody offends you, it hits you in all these regards. Man, you go into fight mode in your brain, and then like your whole body just like starts tingling and you feel like blood flowing to your muscles, and it's like, and then you're offended inside, and emotionally you get in turmoil, and it just all happens, right? But this battle can be won but it starts with the offense. It starts with the thought. It starts with when those ideas crop into our mind. It's a heart, mind, and a soul battle. What makes this so hard for us is the garbage from outside in the world that hits us regularly, right? How many of you guys live in a perfect world? You perfect little neighborhood, perfect little home. Nobody ever parks in your parking spot at work. Nobody ever, leaves a mess in the office, or nobody ever, offends you. Nobody lives with you that offends you. Nobody leaves anything out, doesn't clean up after themselves. You guys live in this if this is you that I'm talking about, you live in this perfectly curated world. I want to trade lives with you. Because my life is not that way. My life is much different than that. There's always external garbage that's coming in. There's always external conflict that's coming into our lives. And that conflict, if we don't take control of it, will begin to program us to become garbage individuals. How many of you guys, raise your hand if you want to be garbage? I don't either. This is the journey that we're on, right? There's two paths in this world: to become a loving, kind, amazing human being, or kind of a trash person, right? And there's people in between, clearly. But I don't want to be a trashy person. I want to be one who encourages. I want to be one who, when you spend time with me and you leave, you want to be more like Christ because you've been in my presence, because Jesus is part of my presence. I want the input of God to be so heavy on the input side of my life that what's coming out of my life looks beautiful, not only to God, but to other people. This external garbage, though, it messes us up. I downloaded, when TikTok first came out, I downloaded it just to see what it was, because I hear these kids on it and stuff like that. And it started out okay. Like, there was some funny videos on there and people doing stupid things and getting hurt. And, I thought people pranking each other. I'm a huge prankster. And I like watching people get pranked. I don't like getting pranked. I like pranking people. And I like watching other people get pranked. Anybody with me in that camp? Are we a team other people getting pranked? Anybody like getting pranked themselves? No, I don't think so. But it's funny. But it was funny, though, right? Like, that's all that matters to me. But I downloaded TikTok, and over time, I started watching TikTok videos, and I was like, this is really turning into a really trash platform. It's just all kinds of brokenness and ugliness happening on there, and it's like, I was becoming sickened by the things that I saw happening on there for other people. I was embarrassed for other people who were on TikTok because their lives are so trashy, and I'm not trying to be all judgy, but the garbage that they're presenting clearly means that upstream from the garbage coming out, there's a lot of garbage coming in that they're being consumed, or that they are consuming, I should say. There's a lot of garbage in our world that we consume. I mean, it's all over. It's not just on TikTok. It's on Netflix and Apple TV and the news, and it's just everywhere you go. I mean, just in your own neighborhood. I mean, there's trash conversations happening all the time. I was keenly aware of this when you have little children and they're really little, and you're really trying to guard their ears and guard their eyes, and there's like certain people are like, oh, we're gonna go to this I don't want to be around those people because their kids cuss like sailors, and my kids are going to be running around with those kids, and I don't want my kids garbaging in and garbaging out, right? We become keenly aware, and our society it's pretty trashy, isn't it? I mean, just think about it. How many, within a half-hour span of time or an hour span of time, if you watch traditional television or even YouTube or something like that, you're going to see alcohol commercials that sell you on a lifestyle that alcohol purely intensifies your life and makes it better. How many of you guys know that to be the case, that alcohol just makes people's lives better? It doesn't happen. clearly there are people who can control their alcohol consumption, and maybe they appreciate that, but the reality is there are alcoholics all around us. There are homeless people all around us there are people living in houses that are just trashing their families because of alcoholism. And yet our world will preach to you on the TV and say, man, if you just consume this alcohol, your life is going to look like a party like these people. Look how much fun these people are having, and your life is going to be that way. That is the external garbage that's being fed to us nonstop in our culture. There's all kinds of garbage like this. If you just, find your own truth, that is a garbage statement. There's no such thing as your own truth. There is objective truth. That is God's truth for our world, the way that our world should be in operation, the way that it was designed for us to function holistically and loving and in kind manners. There's that truth. And then there's everything else that people calls their truth. That's just a lie. It's untruth. It's not true. And yet our culture is telling us to what? Find your truth. Well, your truth just tramples all over other people, right? Because there are things that are pure and lovely and good and beautiful objectively and truthful. And those things are good and should be consumed. The rest of it should be avoided at all costs. Our culture normalizes sexual relationship outside God's healthy bounds. It breaks my heart to see all these kids that we take to Royal Family Kids Camp, because our world normalizes abhorrent sexual relationships so much so that these kids are born without fathers and mothers that love them, and their lives become trash because all they get to consume is trash on the regular. Because they're abused and neglected and they're not cared for. And they end up trafficked and using drugs and being the kids that Janie and I have tried to avoid our children playing around with, right? Because we don't want that garbage coming in. And I'm not against those children. I'm for those children. But the garbage, the normalization of broken sexual relationships has trashed our culture. You want to know an objective truth? When a man and a woman love each other and want to bring life into this world and live their lives in service to these children and to raise them and care for them and nurture them and point them to God, that is a healthy way for children to grow. It's a healthy environment. It is. It's the best way. I'm not trying to poo-poo on anybody who raises children alone. That's a hard job. I would not want to do it any day of the week. I'm so grateful that I have a loving spouse that is raising my children with me. And I'm grateful that we can create a community that helps raise children and provide, what a single parent cannot do, to come alongside and partner. But the normalization that single parenthood is what should be placed above everything else and achieved is not. It's hard. It's super hard. I've met so many single parents and they're like, man, this is tough. And I agree. And my heart breaks for them. That lie, that single parenthood, hey, just go make a bunch of babies and raise them on your own, have the government pay for them. That's not a great way to be living. It's hard. And we should try to avoid this. And when not, we should at least be in culture and community that supports and loves that family through the situation to provide the rest of the resources and what is also necessary and needed there. Garbage in, garbage out. If we buy the lies of the world, then it's no wonder that our world looks like trash, right? Our culture has broken down over the last 50, 60, 70 years, has it not? It seemed better. I had this conversation with Louis before he moved away. I said, what makes me sad is that the American dream that was presented to me, that I grew up learning when I was 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 years old, you could be anything you want, and all this, America's the freest place in the world and all this. It's like, that dream is not the same dream that is given to it's a lie. It's not the same thing. Our culture has broken down. Can we regain that? I hope so. I hope so. Because I think America is still the greatest place in the world, but we're trending not upward, but downward very quickly because of the garbage that we're consuming, what we're normalizing in society and saying this is good and righteous and holy and pure and should be exalted is falsehood. It's not truth. So we have to learn to filter those things out. So I've talked about internal or external garbage. Now there's the internal garbage that programs us wrong. We have our own internal garbage, but the external can damage our internal filter, right? So how many of you guys realize that your filter maybe has gotten damaged, banged up a little bit? You ever look at the back of a window air conditioner and the fins on it? When it's brand new, they look all perfect, but then after a while, when kids have come along and run their fingers across the fins and poked at it and jammed it with a stick, and it kind of looks messed up. It's not all uniform anymore. How many of you guys know that life and brokenness and sin kind of messes up our filter in that regard, right? It's not functioning appropriately anymore. And I realize it's not a filter. I realize that it's condensing heat and it's doing a different job. But it's a good visual because I remember being a kid poking at those when I saw them because they bend really easy and it's kind of cool. It's almost like a toy. And many of our own filters, our internal filters, have become damaged by external sources. Sometimes because of the way that we were raised, the environment we were raised in. Sometimes it's internal, right? How many of you guys have that stinking thinking internal filter where you think the worst things about yourself? How many of you you don't have to raise your hand, how many of you would say that there are other people outside of you that think more highly of you than you do? That's some of us. I know it. I know some nods. I know some of you are watching online. Our internal filter becomes broken. I don't know how exactly that happens, but the stinking thinking also causes doubt in our mind to what God's end is, the output for our lives. Let me put it this way. Anything that casts doubt on God's perfect design and creation of you is stinking thinking. That's garbage in from the internal side in your own life, because God doesn't make junk. I know that sounds like a cliche, but God doesn't make junk. There's a purpose for each and every one of us. I love Psalm 139 because David puts it so beautifully. He says, "Thank you for making me so wonderfully complex. Your workmanship is marvelous. How well I know it." How well I know it. We could say that that's just descriptive of David thinking of himself that way, but I would like to think that the statement from David is prescriptive. He's talking about all of us. He's talking about that God made you in his image for a specific reason. And if your internal filter is twisting that, if there is a little small voice in your mind telling you can't achieve, you can't be, you can't do that, you're not good enough, then that's not of God, that's of Satan. That's from the devil. There's all this internal garbage that comes up. How many of you guys worry? Yeah, that's garbage, right? That doesn't produce anything good except gray hair, and gray hair only looks good on some of us. Fortunately, I'm a dude, and gray hair usually looks distinguished on dudes, so I appreciate that. Thank you, God. Thank you, God, that I'm a dude. You women are beautiful with gray hair, too. But we worry a lot of times, right? Jesus said, don't worry in Matthew 6:25. He says, don't worry. How about judgmental attitudes? How many of you guys have judgmental attitudes? Don't raise your hand. How about judgmental attitude? That's an internal filter, right? I'm good at this one in my car. Everybody drives worse than me when I'm driving behind them. Yeah? You with me on that one? The Bible says to judge not. How about unforgiveness? That's a jacked up internal filter, right? Who does that hurt? Everybody else or you? It hurts you. Unforgiveness, that's a messed up filter. That's garbage. Jesus said, for if you forgive men their trespasses, your heavenly Father will also forgive you. But if you do not forgive men their trespasses, this part sucks. Neither will your heavenly Father forgive you your trespasses. Yeah, don't listen to that unforgiveness filter. That messes you up. That keeps God from being able to forgive you. He said that. I didn't say that. Look it up. It's in Matthew 16, verses 14 and 15. That's him saying that. That's a messed up filter. Oh, I can't forgive my mom because I can't forgive my dad, because I can't forgive my spouse, because I can't forgive my child, because. Do you want God to forgive you? You want a whole life? You want garbage out? Get rid of the garbage in, right? All this kind of brings me to, I want to talk about a filter a little bit. I started being interested in photography a while back, and I bought a cheap camera with a cheap kit lens, and going in line with my theme today, garbage in, garbage out. People think that just because you spend money on a camera body and a cheap kit lens, you're going to get good quality photos. And the answer to that is it's a resounding no. The reason that people spend a lot of money on expensive glass and expensive lenses is because of the way that it filters the light to the image sensor and makes a beautiful image. You may not think of a lens on a camera as a filter, but there are so many different layers on the lenses that the light is coming through. It can get very distorted on a cheap lens when it's not made properly, when it's not made for getting the most quality light to the image sensor or to the film where the photograph is being taken. They go to painstaking manufacturing processes to make expensive lenses. That's why lenses cost so much money. Most of the time they're handmade. A lot of times they're hand ground. This glass is very pure forms of glass. It has these very expensive coatings on it, and it's beautiful. And the reason it produces a beautiful image is because of the way that it beautifully filters the light that is coming into it. I love that analogy because it's our filter, our filters in life, the external and the internal filter that we're dealing with that can change what the image of what God is trying to do with our life, in our life, and through our lives. It can change that as a result of our filter being elevated, right? And that's what we're talking about. When we go back, it says, bring every thought into captivity and to obedience with Christ. What are we talking about? Our filter needs to come into the saving knowledge of Christ, the truth that Jesus Christ has given us. And when that filter is corrected, the external filter and the internal filter, the more correct it becomes, the better the input on the inside, the better the output on the outside. Garbage in, garbage out. Beauty in, beauty out. How many of you realize your internal filter is messed up? Your external filter is a bit messed up. Maybe it's just dusty and dirty. Maybe it's been neglected for a while. Maybe you thought, oh, it's good enough, but maybe it's not good enough. How many of you guys have just thought, you know what, I can get away with it, that I've got quality lenses for my cameras. The reality is they are beautiful pieces of glass and they do a very good job at filtering the light and producing good images. But how many of you guys know that if the lenses on your camera get dirty, like when I go to the beach and there's a heavy sea salt water in the air and stuff like that, I've noticed multiple times I'll be down there taking pictures of my photos, and my photos start looking like I'm taking pictures of Barbara Walters. There's this Barbara Walters filter where it's like, it's super soft, right? Like they did that because as she got older, they started having softer filters on there so her skin looked better the older, especially when they went to high definition. The reality is I looked at my filter, or the lens on my camera, and there's all this sea mist salt stuff on my glass, and I'm looking at my photos. I'm like, man, it's not. I'm zooming in my daughter's photo. Her eyes are not sharp anymore. What's going on? And I realized that the filter, the lens, the outer lens, had become dirty from the elements on the outside. There's also something that happens with my camera. On the inside, sometimes I get these gray dots around. I'll have a blue sky and there's like a gray dot up here. And I pull my lens off and I look, and on the image sensor, there's dust or debris on the image sensor and it needs to be cleaned. So just like my camera that has lenses that need the external filter, which is the lens itself, and the image sensor on the inside, our filters need to be cleaned. And even if you have a good filter, it can get dirty. Maybe you haven't been messed up. Maybe God has done the work in your life, but if we become lax and we don't work on the garbage, that if we allow the garbage coming in to dirty our filter, guess what starts coming out? It's not nearly as pure. It's like my refrigerator. It's got a filter for the water. I never change it. I just reset it. I fooled Janie for 20 some years. She thinks that we have good tasting water. It is good tasting water coming out of the refrigerator. Same filter since we got the refrigerator. Same filter. I just reset the thing. Kids don't know either. It's because I'm cheap. It's because I'm cheap. It does taste good. It does taste good still. Tastes better than the tap water. If it's cold enough, it all tastes good. We have to realize that our filter over time, even if you think, man, I've gone to church, I've got a good, healthy relationship, I've done this, I've done the work with God, I've done the work inside and out, there's always work that can be done. There's always maintenance that can be done on our filter. So there's a more pure product coming out of our lives. We want nothing but the beauty of God shining through directly through our lives, just like there is no filter at all. We want it to be just as pure, like when I'm taking photos with a very fast piece of glass and that light comes unencumbered almost right to the image sensor and the beauty is captured. It's exactly what we need in our lives. So I think we need to do some work. I think that we need to do some mental work, some spiritual work. There's some work that needs to be done in our lives because it's easy to get lax on what input you're putting in, right? And it's one thing to just try to avoid the external input of the world, but shouldn't we be putting in a lot of Jesus? Shouldn't there be like a lot of an input stream of Jesus into our life? Anybody get lax in reading the Bible and spending time with God, walking and talking with Jesus, wondering what he's doing in your life? The reality is I think we can all do better. There's 3 things to help us do better. Just like in photography, getting in more light as quickly as possible, primo. The thing we need to do in our lives, we need to get in more light. What's that mean? It means getting in more Jesus. How do you do that? I don't know how you do that. Do you do a Bible study with somebody? Do you have conversations? Do you go, when you're on with Jesus, are you having conversations with a mentor? Are you reading your Bible for an hour a day, for a chapter a day? What are you doing? Are you listening to worship music? Are you edifying people? Are you writing? Are you reading? I don't know what you're doing. I don't know what it looks like for you. I don't know what the more light looks like for you, but we need to be getting in more of Jesus and less of the world. Amen? More of Jesus and less of the world. How many of you guys feel, I mean, you guys got to know this. Like, when you're on with Jesus, it just feels like things just are breezing through. Just breezing by, right? It's like, man, you're in the Word and things are going, God's speaking to you and you feel like you're on cloud 9, and then some of that beach haze starts to get on your lens and kind of cloud it up a little bit. We got to let in more light. That's the first thing we can do. Somebody said sunlight is one of the best disinfectants. It's true. During COVID, I remember we started going out all the time, right? When it first started, they're like, COVID's spreading inside the home in dark places where the air is being recirculated. He said the COVID virus lasted for not many seconds out in UV rays. So what do? We went to the beach a lot. We were going to the beach all the time. There's nobody there. It was great. UV rays everywhere. Sunlight is the best disinfectant. We need more sunlight in our life. Read God's word every morning. Get a little bit more of God. On the input side, let's not put in the world. Let's put in the light. Also, filter out your negativity and garbage. That internal, that stinking thinking that we talked about, right? We can all get down on ourselves. You guys might not believe this, but I get down on myself sometimes too. I think it's easier the older you get. You start looking when you feel like there's more miles behind you than there is in front of you, and you wonder, like, what's the result of your life? What have I done? What impact have I made on this world? That stinking thinking. Well, that's not where we should focus our eyes. We should focus our eyes on the Son and get more of that input in, find out what God would have us do in these later years of our lives, in these years of our lives going forward. There's nothing we can do about the ones behind us, but we can do everything about the ones in front of us, right? And if you're younger, if you're listening and you got your life all ahead of you, then talk to somebody older and try to avoid all the garbage, all the mess in life. I know you think that some of us older people are, just don't want you to have a good time, but turns out what you think is the good time is not really the good time. It's a bad time. It turns into a bad time. It's like the alcohol commercial, right? They never show you people passed out, puking in their car and arrested and getting the DUI and having to take the bus to work. And that wouldn't make a good alcohol commercial, would it? It doesn't. It doesn't. So filter out that negativity and that garbage. And then avoid destructive environments for your filter as much as possible. What's coming in? What's coming in? What are you watching? Who are you listening to? I listen to podcasts most of the time, and they're usually Christian people or philosophical or things that are trying to get me to think in new ways and learn more about God, understand the Bible a bit more, understand people or psychology a bit more, so I can be more helpful to people as I bump into them. That's what we should be filling our lives with. If you're just listening to pop music because it's fun, okay, maybe it's not the same thing as taking in the sunlight, taking in beauty, challenging yourself to do hard things. Avoid the destructive environments, and you know what those are. Maybe it's limiting your time on Netflix or YouTube or TikTok, or I think you just get rid of TikTok altogether. It's a garbage app. It really is. Multiple ways. Side note. So 3 things again: let in more sunlight, filter out the negativity and garbage from the inside, and then avoid destructive environments that damage your filter. Don't let your air conditioner fans get all jacked up like when you ran a stick across them when you were a kid. That was just me. I'm the only destructive one here. Let's pray. Lord God, I thank you for your word. I thank you for your Holy Spirit that speaks to our hearts. God, I know your word has gone out today. I pray that your Holy Spirit would bring it alive and make it alive to those watching online, to those who are here. I pray that you would take the words that were spoken in general and make them very personal in the context of each and every believer who hears this message. I pray that they would, again, like we sang about this morning, find ourselves in the presence of your Holy Spirit. Let us experience your presence more fully each and every day. Let us invite the light into our lives so that the input of our life looks beautiful because of the input. The output of our life looks beautiful because of the input of our life. God, we thank you for the edification that happens in your body. Thank you for the part that we get to play in your kingdom here. And we thank you for another beautiful day. We ask these things in your name. Amen.